This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Welcome into another edition of 3 Mod. John Kurtz, Cole Manbeck with you, getting ready for part 2 of our interview with Brad Underwood, former K-State coach, former K-State player, now, of course, the head coach at Illinois. Great stuff in part 1, and you're going to get even more here in part 2, just more stories that continue to flow and flow about his time at K-State as both a player and a coach. So without further ado, here is part 2 with Brad Underwood.
As we transition to that 09-10 team, Brad, Frank told the story on with us that it was, I think, the Wichita State scrimmage. You guys were scrimmaging Wichita State before that 09-10 season, and you looked at Frank, and after that scrimmage, he said you thought you lost maybe by 3, but you guys weren't really, you didn't care about that. And you looked at Frank and you said, Frank, we're really good. We're really, really good. And Frank was like, oh, stop it. I'm just curious, like, what was it just about that team that let you know early on that was going to be such a special group?
The pieces fit. You know, there was a maturity. Obviously, our backcourt was pretty good, and it all starts with there with those guys. And you know, Denny was different with his speed. You know, and I think that Denny was good for Jake, but you know, Curtis Kelly. Kurt was different, and we hadn't had anybody like him. And you know, he was a ballyhooed high school player, went to UConn, didn't pee a drop, to be honest, got sidetracked, got overweight, worked his tail off, and all of a sudden here now we're starting to see all of that. And it was, but the pieces fit. You know, Dominic Sutton, the young guys were good and athletic. They brought something, and it was just all of that team just putting the glue to the pieces to solidify it. But the pieces were there, and you know, if I had any doubts at all, it would be, you know, and I remember saying, it's, you know, our guards are small. Our guards are small. You know, can we handle, you know, bigger? But I mean, Denny's speed, and people forget how good a defender Jacob was. You know, Jake was as good on the ball defender as there was. But so I always felt good about that team, and we had, like I said, we probably had the best guards in the country.
When you think about the tournament run that team went on, I mean, you guys knock out Jimmer Fredette, you have the crazy game against Xavier, and then, you know, a game against Butler. I know Frank said he kind of lamented the way he handled the practice schedule in between a short turnaround that you had, playing a late night overtime game, and then having to play early on Sunday after that. But what comes to mind when you think about everything that team did in March?
There are a few things. Played a really good North Texas team who was talented. They had good players, and that game wasn't easy. I had the BYU scout, and obviously Jimmer was the guy that was really one of the talks of college basketball that year. He could get 40 any night. He had the freedom to shoot a lot of balls. Well, it was my genius idea, and I talked Frank. I said, we can't put one of the little guys on him. I said, he's just going to jump up and score. I said, so let's put Dominic Sutton on him. Let's put some size on him. Dom was could be a really good defender. He was physical. And if you guys remember the start of that game, we're down 10-0. Yeah. And Frank looks over and he goes, you got any more brilliant effing ideas? And he goes, if you do, keep them to yourself. I'm not listening to you the rest of the night. And so it was put Jake back on Jimmer, and the game was over. And I mean, it was so I remember that. I remember Frank screaming at me, which was fine because that idea didn't work very well. And but we ended up just kind of breaking their spirit in that game. And I remember, Jimmer didn't even want to handle the ball anymore because Jake was in his shirt. And we had played. We knew how good Xavier was. We had played them earlier in the season in Manhattan in what was a heck of a game, and we were juiced for that game. I was concerned about that game because we were hyped for the game in Manhattan. They had beat us 100 the year before in Cincinnati, and we had Mike and we didn't have Mike. We were horrible, and in that game, but we were hyped for the game in Manhattan. And I was like, can we get back to that level emotionally for that tournament game? And it's a Sweet 16 game. And yet we were off the chart. And obviously one of the great college basketball games of that season, maybe in NCAA tournament history, it's still one of the best. I remember so many shots. Jacob pulling shot at the top of the key. We were running what we call motion 2, and Jake was supposed to run off the baseline, and he just stopped and went to the top of the key because the defense cheated it. It's a 3. I remember Frank putting in Chris Merriweather a walk on to commit the intentional foul, and he fouls, but it was in the act of shooting, and Crawford makes 3 free throws, and it was me screaming at Frank all night in the Butler game to put Rodney Magruder in, and we needed his jump shooting, and Rodney gives up back-to-back baskets, and he came to sit down, and Frank told me to be quiet again and never offer up any more opinions. So, it was really challenging. People don't realize we just did it again this year, how hard it is to play a really late game. And I remember it was 2 a.m. before we got our guys to bed. And then we had an early shoot around time and early media time the next day. And really, for the first time all year, and Frank brought it up, we didn't do anything in practice. We walked through, and that team wasn't built for that. That team was a hype team. It was a fast-paced team. It was a competitive team. They were ready to go, and we were flat. And obviously, a very, very good Butler team. But I thought that K-State team was probably the second best team in the tournament. I don't know if we would have beaten Duke that year, but we were damn good. We were damn good. We were tough as hell. And that's the beauty of the NCAA tournament, though. You have a little bit of an off night, and you go home.
Well, this show, as always, brought to you by our friends at Home Field Apparel. I've got the Every Man a Wildcat shirt on here today from Home Field Apparel. But honestly, that's kind of an old one. They've had like 2 or 3 K-State drops since then, so you can get 50-plus different K-State designs there. At homefieldapparel.com, you can use promo code 3MA23 to get 15% off your first order there. This is the gear everyone's wearing these days. Retro gear, Copper Bowl logos. Hey, we're talking here to a guy in Brad Underwood who played for Jack Hartman. You can get a Big 8 champ shirt from the 70s there at homefieldapparel.com as well, or the old school like shooting shirt, probably one that the Brad wore at one point in time. So homefieldapparel.com, promo code 3MA23 to get 15% off your first order.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
Well, 10-11, Frank was telling us how wild that was, which obviously everybody kind of knew from the outside, all the expectations, a really low point in the middle of the season, and then we were talking with him about the offense that you were able to institute there, that like pinch post offense that helped turn the season around. And, Frank said, you had been on him for a while about using that offense, and it finally popped up at the right time. What do you remember about finally getting to divulge that to kind of help save the season?
You know, it was different. We were asking Jacob to be everything, and that was really unfair to Jake. We were asking him to score. We were asking him to get guys involved, to distribute. That team was maybe needed some help scoring, but they also needed some help with guys setting the table for them, and so it became a lot for Jake. And you could see him trying to be a point guard. So the offense became more equal opportunity, but it also became an opportunity for guys like Jamar Samuels, guys to score at the rim with the cutting and the movement, and it got the ball out of Jake's hands a little bit, but it got him the ball in spots where he was a monster. I always remember the game against Kansas. I think he had 36, and he's coming off the pinch post. They just couldn't guard it, and it didn't matter if they went under, it didn't matter if they went over, and all of those reads became secondary. But you have to give Frank credit for changing that midstream. That's hard, and that's not an easy offense for guys to have to shift gears to. And even when we struggled in it early, Frank stayed with it. He stayed with it. He was patient as hell, and I'm not sure I would have been that patient, to be very honest. And but man, we got clicking with that, and it became impossible to scout us. It became really hard to scout us as an opponent, but it made everybody else better. And then all of a sudden, here's Jacob now turning into one of the great players in the country. And it just eased the burden. And it was fun to watch. And, we always we got a lot of layups, our efficiency. I'm not sure we were too dialed into analytics like we are now, but our efficiency was through the roof, John, and it made our defense better, and it was less. We were scoring at a better rate, so it made our defense better because it didn't stress our defense so much to have to be great every possession.
When I think back to that season, Brad, I think about the game in Boulder where Rodney hits the game-winning three and it gets waved off when they go to the monitor, and you guys have less than a 48-hour turnaround time. That game's late on a Saturday night, and you got Kansas, the number one team in the country, on Big Monday coming your way in Manhattan. And I remember, I first of all, I left Boulder that night. I wrote my stories, and I drove back to Manhattan and got in at 8 a.m. I didn't want to, look, Brad, I'm a K-State fan. I covered the team, but, those losses hurt still. And so I just drove home from Boulder that night. But I wondered at the time, I was like, gosh, I don't know if they have the ability to bounce back from that heartbreak. You guys were struggling a little bit, and then you guys completely flip a switch, go on to win like 7 of the last 8. You beat KU by 16, the number one team in the country. You win at Texas, top 20 team on the road. Just what do you remember from maybe that Sunday, Monday to turn it around when you beat KU? I think Frank told a story. He walked in with knee pads on. I don't know if you remember that, get the guys loose. And what do you recall from that?
Right. That's Frank Martin at his best. That's because I remember. I mean, there was just a flick of a fingernail on that ball at Colorado, just a tick late, and that's the beauty of the Big 12. I think is you are going to get a big Monday, and you're going to get that quick turn, and and obviously when you had those, Kansas was playing at home, and they were resting, and we were in a dogfight, and then you got to travel home, but and that was an emotional loss, and things were hard, but that is when Frank Martin is absolutely at his best, when the back is against the wall, rallying the troops. You don't have any, looks like there's no hope. Everybody's against you. It's us against the world. It's, the mighty Jayhawks coming to town. And Frank's going to get you to, he's going to get the hair on the back of your neck to stand up in those moments, in those practices. And it was all him in practice. There were many days when, Frank didn't allow coaches but it was him getting those dudes ready. And we practiced, it wasn't the day after and day in between a game. It was like, no, hey, we got Kansas coming in, forget what happened last night. And we practiced, and it was a 3-hour practice, bust your ass, get after it. And that's the beauty of Frank. And lo and behold, there we go. And it's, sometimes I say this all the time. That's when Frank's absolutely at his best, when everything seems like the bottom of the barrel is about to fall out.
Well, Frank had a lot of great memories to share about you. I'm curious, do you have any great memories? What's your favorite memory or story about Frank Martin that you love to tell?
Well, first of all, if Frank said stories about me, they're absolutely all false. And he tells the story all the time, and because with Hugs there was and I don't know what he told, but there was always the smorgasbord of food on the scorer's table. And there was, there'd be peanut M&Ms, there'd be peanuts, there'd be Chex Mix. At that time we were all drinking a lot of diet soda. There'd be a cooler of diet soda. And, Frank always tells a story. I look up at the scoreboard one day and I said, what's it? 16 to 12. We had 11 on the other. And as soon as I asked the question, everybody's on the floor just dying laughing. Practice stops, and Hugs calls me over and he puts his arm around me. He said, "You've been in the Chex Mix 16 times. You've been in the peanut M&Ms 12. You've been in the peanuts 10." And he said, "We're all keeping track of you," because at the time I was the ops guy, so I couldn't be on the court. So I would pull a stair stepper up to the side of the court, and I would get on that thing for an hour, and then I would go to the other end of the court, and I had a bike down at that end. Well, in between, I would just grab food, and man, I'm putting on weight. I'm working out like crazy, but I am getting fat as hell. And so they decided one day to keep track. But great Frank story, and it goes back to the year with Hugs. If you'll remember, that was an NIT team. And we get Vermont at home, and they are good. And we had no true desire to want to be in that game. And we're fighting. I think we end up winning in overtime. Frank is really mad at Cartier. And he's frustrated as heck with him, but Cartier's keeping us in the game. And Cartier, make a long story short, Cartier fouls out, and Frank is furious. He's gone out. There was a timeout. Frank's gotten Cartier and David Hoskins' butt, and like Hugs can't even conduct the timeout because Frank's so mad at those guys. But Cartier is fouled out now. Frank's got his head down, and he's just, he's got his hand over his head, and the game's going back on. And Hugs looks over at him, and he goes, "Yo, Frank. He goes, "You got any advice? You going to help me tonight, or were you just going to sit here?" And Frank doesn't look up. Hugs kind of nudges him. "Yo, help me, let's go." And Frank's just, and he's so mad at Cartier. And he goes, Frank just looks up and he goes, Hugs, Cartier's the only guy that's scoring. Put him back in. And Hugs looks down, puts his arm around him. The game's going on now. And he kisses him on the forehead. And he goes, Frank, Cartier fouled out 2 minutes ago. And I mean, Delonte Hill and I, you should see our look. And because Hugs gives him a kiss on the forehead, and we just die laughing. And it was one of those moments you just like. Frank was bad because he wasn't guarding anybody, but he was keeping and just lost track. And Hugs just kisses him on the forehead. But there was there's a lot of good moments. But I always remember one of my favorite pictures. There's Hugs, myself, and Frank, all in suits, kind of walking off the court. And to me, that picture will last a lifetime with me. Now we look like the Chiefs' offensive line at that time, but it was that's a pretty cool pick. And you know, we're all in purple, got purple on in some way, and you know, Frank's obviously had incredible success in his coaching life, and I've been blessed and made it, and obviously Hugs is a Hall of Famer, but that's a pretty cool picture, and I take so much, you know, pride as a K-Stater, and that, you know, that's wearing purple. You know, we're back there, all of us, and doing that, and, you know, in Bramlage, and getting that thing back to where it should be.
Some of that was the style of the time, I'll tell you, Brad. Like, it was baggy suits then, okay? So, you know, give yourself a little bit of credit in the picture there. But
no, we were all fat as shit. we were all big. I mean, it was, you know, there was only Aggieville for lunch every day. It was a you know, the black bean raspberry dip.
yes,
with 4 baskets of chips was caught up.
well, a bunch of salt apparently. Frank said you would like throw a bunch of salt on the chip.
Oh gosh, I love salt, and I mean, I just would dump a salt shaker on there. Poor Matt Figure, he would just he would drink 2 gallons of water every day at lunch because I had so much salt on the chips.
Well, you heard Brad Underwood talk about his golf game and going on some golfing trips with Coach Chris Kleiman at Kansas State, and how they play together. Well, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if they use some PXG golf clubs on occasion. If not, we need to tell them about PXG Golf and a location in Overland Park. As a golfer for years, I've been hearing PXG say nobody makes golf clubs like they do, period. Know what? They're right. I went in for a fitting and saw for myself. I went in and swung the PXG Black Ops driver, total game changer. No longer have to sacrifice distance for forgiveness. No matter how good the tools, getting fitted can take your game to a whole new level, and they'll even give you a dozen golf balls free just for doing it. The world-class team of PXG experts will analyze every aspect of your swing with every club and give you feedback in real time on how to improve. And they did just that when I went in there for my fitting. Never been fitted for clubs before. Didn't know what to expect when I went into the PXG golf location over in Overland Park, and it was a tremendous experience. For everything from when I walked in the door, the customer service was phenomenal. They offered me a water. They repeatedly were making sure I was taken care of, that I was comfortable. Went into the back and then hit 100-plus golf balls, hit a lot of shots with the irons. They were fitting me for that as well. And then the Black Ops PXG driver, they also fitted me for, let me hit about 50 balls with that. Analyze the swing. All the data analytics were there for me to look at and see how my swing was looking, see where the ball was going. They got the mat in front of you with the image of where the ball is traveling, if you're slicing, if you're drawing, if you're hitting it straight, what's a good shot, what's not. Got the analytics on the side over on the big board computer monitor that shows you the velocity, spin rate, loft, elevation of your shot, etc., the distance that shot would have traveled on estimate. A ton of fun and a great experience, and they continued to adjust to clubs, and by the time my swings were done, they had me fitted just right to accommodate my swing and make it look far better. The ball was going straight and traveling farther by the time they were done with it. So go check them out. Go check out the fine folks at PXG Golf over on Overland Park at 7517 West 19th Street. They made me a believer. They'll do the same for every golfer in Kansas City. Visit pxg.com/3mall to schedule your fitting at PXG Kansas City. Get fitted for any club and you'll get a dozen free golf balls. That's pxg.com/3mall to schedule your fitting. pxg.com/3mall. Limit 1 dozen golf balls per person. Promotion ends June 30th. Other terms and conditions may apply. See store for details.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
The one last thing I was going to ask you, because I feel like this has been amazing to hear all these stories, and this is Cole and I's era when we were in college and then covering the team too, but you played at K-State, and I was born in 1989. I know Cole's only a couple of years older than me. We know about the history, but you experienced a lot of it. So, like, to guys like us, what would you tell us about what your playing days were like, playing for Jack Hartman, and what K-State basketball was like back then?
Jack was the best. Jack, to this day, is as good a bench coach, as good a teacher as I've ever seen in this game. Now, he was hard. Man, was he hard. There were different times. He had the Coach Iba. I'll never forget the times where Coach Iba would come to Manhattan and he would sit at the scorer's table. And coach's practices, I mean, he was the dominant personality. But when Coach Iba was there, he might call you over and talk to you, and you just had you knew him, you knew all of his history, Coach Iba's, and to me it was just those were such cool moments, when he's telling me how slow I am and I need to strap a motor to my ass, and and here's Coach Iba, and you're and he's helping you. And it was just, Ahern was special. I studied the great memories running on the court there, and the light coming through, and the fans right there on top of you, and you don't forget those things. But Jack was unbelievable, and it was always you never felt like you were going to lose because you were so well prepared, and obviously it was a time in the Big Eight where there was some transition, kind of getting away from Norm Stewart a little bit, and Jack Hartman and Joe Cipriano, and now it's starting to become a little bit of Larry Brown, Billy Tubbs. We had Iowa State's teams were phenomenal, but it was just unbelievable league. It was, but coach was special.
We'll get you out of here real soon, Brad. You've been very gracious with your time. This has been a blast. But I'm also curious. I got to ask you, any funny recruiting stories that you remember? We heard one about Jason Bennett and crab legs, but I don't know.
But you heard it. I don't need to repeat it because that's the first one that's the first one that came to mind as soon as you said that. That's one of those that you just don't forget. But I always remember, Doe's Steakhouse. Doe's was in business then, and we had a ton of recruiting meals out at Doe's. And then I'll always remember we had Dr. Weefold would always have recruits at his home. So it's a weekend. We've got Bill Walker, Mike's in. we're at Dr. Weefald's house, huge recruiting weekend. We're sitting in the dining room, and one of Hugs's good friends was a guy that ran. No, we had Dwan Blair in. That's the weekend. It was Dwan Blair.
That's right.
And I think Mike was in that weekend. But we're at the president's house. And anyway, J.O. Strite ran an AAU program called the Jots. And J.O.'s an East Coast guy. He's from Pittsburgh. And J.O. liked a glass of wine with his dinner. Now we've rolled it out. Dr. Weefald's rolled it out. We've got, fillets and great dinner. And we're just getting ready to get started. And then everybody knows Dr. Weefald didn't drink. So J.O. hits the fine china with the fork, and he goes, "Surely we're in this luxurious home and we're having this great meal. Surely there's a bottle of wine somewhere in this house." And Hugs just, like, you see his eyes get really big, like, I can't believe this guy's asking for a bottle of wine. We're sitting here in the president's house and this big table, and Ruth Ann just jumps up and she goes, "Well, by golly, J.O., we do have some wine in this house." And she comes back and she goes, "Now, we don't drink, but we receive these as gifts, and I don't know if they're any good or not." Well, there was a really expensive bottle of Silver Oak. And he goes, "This one will suffice. This one will be just fine." And one of the peep waiters goes and has it. J.O.'s the only one that drinks wine. He drank the entire bottle. And we're sitting there going, all right, okay, and this is a little different. And a week later, we get a call, and J.O. had sent her a case of Silver Oak. Now, that was probably a $1,500 tab, I'm guessing, to send a case of Silver Oak. But you just remember different moments like that just catch you off guard. And it's not one that's super funny, but it's a moment that just sticks out as in the process. But and I think the recruiting was special there because Dr. Weefald did that and brought everybody to his house and made such a huge impact because people got to see the intimacy of the K-State family and what that looked like. So, yeah, it was fun times.
An incredible man, what he did for Kansas State, Dr. Weefald, someone I look very fondly of and miss the stories that he used to have when he would call me on occasion and we would chat. I just love to sit.
Cole, he was he was living in northern Minnesota, at his lake house.
Yeah.
And he would call me every month here in Illinois. And I brought he and Ruth Ann down to a game in Minneapolis when we played Minnesota, set him right behind the bench and brought him in the locker room. We had a night, it was a good win to win in Minneapolis and brought him in the locker room, let him speak to my team, after the game for a few minutes, and he's dapping everybody up and he was the CEO at K-State. I mean, he was, but he just loved sports and he's obviously, bringing Bill and all that to Kansas State and helping K-State football survive, really. Big guy in the change from the Big 8 to the Big 12, in expansion. So guy that did a ton for not just Kansas State, but college sports and the trajectory that we're now on.
Yeah. No, completely agree. I guess I'll end on this, Brad. I have to ask you because 2012, as we go through kind of the chronological timeline, Frank leaves for South Carolina. What was that timeline like for you? We've asked you about a couple different coaching changes throughout, but I'm just curious, what was going through your head when Frank left? You'd proven yourself at Kansas State and you had a lot to what they did.
You're going to, in all transparency, you're hurt. when you don't, it wasn't like Frank wasn't successful. I think his first 5 years were more successful than any other head coach in the history of that program in their first 5 years, or really close. And, I thought that I'd have been a great head coach. But things happen for a reason. Obviously, Bruce, I'd been let go at Illinois and had great success here till the very end. Was experienced, had found success at a lot of places. And I think just at that time, that was the direction John wanted to go. It was hard. My wife taught school there, our kids grew up there, and that kind of change was hard at that time because we left and went with Frank to South Carolina, and I was that's who I am. I was very, very loyal to Frank, and I wasn't going to stay at Kansas State with somebody that I didn't know, and that's no offense to Bruce, when they offered me that opportunity. But you're hurt. You paid your dues. It worked out for me. I say this, I'm the most blessed guy on the planet because we went to South Carolina and I get a head coaching job literally on what may have been one of the worst teams in the history of the SEC. That team wasn't very good. I think we won 12 games. And I get a head coaching job at a great spot at Stephen F. Austin. And so I felt like I was ready at K-State, but it's things happen for a reason, and John went a different direction, and so did I, and it never changed my love for K-State or my passion for the people there. It just wasn't meant to be, I guess, but it was, I'm not going to lie. It was a hard day, a couple days to deal with and go through that. But my family all came out just great and survived. And my wife's still with me. She didn't stay. And so we're all good.
I'd say you've done pretty damn well for yourself, Brad. Obviously, I had to do a double take. I knew how good you were at Stephen F. Austin, but then I saw 53-1 in the Southland Conference and 89-14. Obviously, all 3 years in the NCAA tournament, advanced to the second round a couple times, and you take Oklahoma State to the tournament in 1 year. And then, obviously what you've done at Illinois, winning 70+% of your games over the last 5 seasons. You've done a hell of a job there. I did have to ask, just out of curiosity, you don't have to divulge this if you don't want, but did John Curry call you about the head coaching job
at
K-State?
Frank left?
Yes.
Yeah, I talked to John.
Yeah, so
we had a face-to-face. So
okay.
And that was I felt like it was probably mine, or I didn't know Bruce was the guy till Bruce was announced, but he did have a conversation with me. So that was in fairness to all of that, that did happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been very blessed. SFA was a great spot and really good players and a great staff, and then to go to Oklahoma State and that was a place that I thought I potentially in my career enjoyed my time there, albeit very short, but the Illinois opportunity came along, and my time at Western Illinois, I knew how passionate Illinois was. They've got the same type of fans, and it was just the right move at the right time. And what we've done here, I've got great administrative support, and we've spent $200+ million on facilities and basketball renovations in my time here, and we sell out every night. So it's a good spot. And I think we can continue to keep churning up the ladder to try to win a national championship.
Yeah, well, your track record certainly speaks for itself, as Cole outlined there. So we can't tell you enough how much we appreciate your time here, Brad. It's awesome to see what you're doing at Illinois and what you've been able to do since leaving K-State. And thanks for taking the time to reminisce with us. It's been awesome to get a trip down memory lane here.
Absolutely, and my pleasure. And thanks, guys. And Ema.